A black man walks into a luxury car dealership and gets kicked out by the manager. What the manager doesn't know, that man owns the place. What happens next will leave you speechless. Watch till the end. Sure. Here is your 1,200-word story script, told in a compelling single-paragraph format, designed for YouTube storytelling. It starts with a subscriber call to action, flows naturally into the narrative, and keeps the audience engaged throughout. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon, because you won't want to miss more true stories that'll shock, inspire, and stay with you long after the video ends. Now let's get into it. Get out. You don't belong here. That's what Marcus heard the moment he walked into the shiny glass doors of Crown Motors, a luxury car dealership in Atlanta. Dressed in a plain hoodie and jeans, he wasn't greeted with a smile or even a, "Can I help you?" Just cold, sharp judgment. The manager on duty, Steve, didn't let him speak, didn't look at his eyes, didn't even check if Marcus was a customer. He just pointed at the door like Marcus was trash. "This place isn't for people like you," he said. "We don't need any trouble today." Marcus froze. Not because he was afraid, but because of how casually the hate was served. He looked around at the sleek black and silver showroom. Rows of polished luxury vehicles glimmered beneath bright showroom lights. The smell of fresh leather filled the room. This was supposed to be a big day for him. A proud day. But instead, he was being treated like a trespasser. The receptionist across the room looked up and then quickly looked away. No one intervened. Marcus could have walked out. He could have yelled. But he didn't. He smiled, because Marcus knew something Steve didn't. Marcus was no ordinary man walking in to cause trouble. He was the new owner of Crown Motors. The ink on the acquisition paperwork had dried just 2 days ago. His company had bought the dealership after months of negotiations, and today was his first unannounced visit to see the staff, understand the operation, and maybe shake a few hands. Clearly, not all hands wanted to be shaken. Instead of confronting Steve right away, Marcus calmly reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He texted his assistant, "Come inside now and bring the papers." Steve, still standing there with crossed arms, rolled his eyes. "I told you to leave. You're trespassing." Marcus chuckled. "Are you always this rude to potential customers?" Steve didn't blink. "Only to the ones who walk in here looking like they just came from a street corner. This is a luxury dealership. Our clients are professionals, not thugs." The words hung in the air like poison. Just then, the front doors opened, and in walked a sharply dressed woman in heels, holding a briefcase. It was Marcus's assistant, Denise. She walked straight up to him, ignoring Steve entirely. "Mr. Brown," she said with a smile, "here are the ownership documents you asked for." Marcus took them without looking and handed them directly to Steve. "You might want to read that," he said coolly. Confused and slightly irritated, Steve opened the folder. His eyes scanned the pages. First, slowly, then faster. Then he froze. His face went pale. The documents were clear. Marcus Brown, a 32-year-old entrepreneur, was the new owner of Crown Motors. The entire dealership, including the very desk Steve was standing behind, belonged to him. This has to be a joke," Steve stammered, suddenly sweating. "You're the new owner?" Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Still think I don't belong here?" Silence fell over the showroom. A few salespeople had gathered nearby, pretending to organize papers or check car interiors, but everyone was watching. Denise folded her arms and stood tall beside Marcus. Steve's voice cracked. "Mr. Brown, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I thought—" "You thought I was a threat because of my skin color and the way I dressed," Marcus said flatly. "That's what you thought." Steve shook his head, trying to backpedal. No, it's just, there are a lot of thefts lately, and I was just trying to be cautious." Marcus didn't flinch. Cautious is asking a question. Cautious is verifying. You didn't ask who I was. You didn't even ask my name. You judged me the second I walked in. He looked around at the staff. "Is this how you treat all your customers who don't look like they stepped out of a corporate office?" The silence was heavy. Finally, one of the younger salespeople spoke up. "Honestly, sir, Steve's done this before. He assumes things about people. He scares customers off sometimes. A few even wrote complaints." Marcus nodded slowly. "Thank you for your honesty." He turned back to Steve. "I came in here today to observe, to see how this place ran before I introduced myself. And unfortunately, I saw exactly what I needed to see." Steve was now visibly panicking. "Please, Mr. Brown, this won't happen again. I'll make it right. I'll do anything." Marcus paused, thinking. Then he said, "You're right. It won't happen again, because you're no longer employed here." The words struck like thunder. Steve gasped, stepping back. "Wait, what? You're firing me?" Marcus met his eyes. "Not because you embarrassed me, not even because you were rude, but because you represent everything I refuse to allow in my business: racism, arrogance, and incompetence." Denise handed Steve a formal termination letter. "It's already been prepared," she said. "Security will escort you out." As Steve gathered his things in stunned silence, Marcus turned to the rest of the staff. "Let this be a lesson. I value respect, integrity, and professionalism. I don't care if someone walks in wearing jeans or a three-piece suit. Everyone who enters this building deserves to be treated with dignity." The staff nodded, some looking ashamed, others relieved. That moment marked a turning point. Over the next few months, Marcus transformed Crown Motors. He implemented new diversity training, improved customer service policies, and even launched a community outreach program to make luxury vehicles more accessible to underserved groups. Business boomed, not just because the cars were great, but because the values behind the company were even better. Customers noticed. Word spread. People came not just to buy cars, but to support a dealership that finally represented change. And Marcus? He continued walking through his own showroom in a hoodie and jeans, not to prove a point, but because he didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. He'd already done it. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon, because you won't want to miss more true stories that'll shock, inspire, and stay with you long after the video ends. Now let's get into it. "Get out. You don't belong here." That's what Marcus heard the moment he stepped into the shiny glass doors of Crown Motors, a high-end car dealership in the heart of Atlanta. Dressed in a plain hoodie and jeans, he wasn't greeted with a smile or even a curious glance, just instant judgment. Steve, the manager on duty, didn't let Marcus speak, didn't ask his name, didn't offer help. Instead, with arms crossed and a disgusted look on his face, he barked, "This place isn't for people like you. We don't need any trouble today." Marcus stood still, stunned. Not afraid, just surprised by how confidently Steve assumed the worst. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't lost. He had an appointment. But Steve didn't care to ask. He saw a young black man and jumped to conclusions. What Steve didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just anybody. Marcus had grown up in a low-income neighborhood, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. He knew the value of hard work before he even hit his teens. As a kid, he dreamed, not just of being rich, but of being someone who could change lives. At 19, Marcus started his own car detailing business. Armed with nothing more than a bucket, sponge, and ambition, he went door to door offering affordable car washes. Some days he made just enough for lunch. Other days, he went home with blisters and barely enough gas money, but he never quit. 5 years later, that side hustle turned into a full-fledged auto company with a small fleet, loyal customers, and real profits. By the time he hit 30, Marcus owned multiple businesses, had built a 7-figure net worth, and had just made the biggest investment of his life. He had purchased Crown Motors, the very dealership he was now being kicked out of. Yes, you heard that right. Marcus was the new owner. And Steve, the same manager now yelling at him in front of other staff and customers? He was on the list of employees Marcus had planned to meet that morning. Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he calmly reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and sent a text to his assistant. "Bring the documents. Come inside now." Steve, still standing guard like a bouncer outside a nightclub, scoffed. "Did you not hear me the first time? Leave." or I'll call security." Marcus smiled, not with arrogance but with a kind of knowing calm that comes from having nothing left to prove. "Are you always this rude to customers?" he asked. Steve rolled his eyes. "To people like you? Yeah. You come in here dressed like that, looking suspicious. It's obvious you're not here to buy anything." Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Moments later, the glass doors opened and in walked a sharply dressed woman holding a leather folder, his assistant, Denise. She walked straight to Marcus and handed him the papers. "Here you go, Mr. Brown," she said, just loud enough for everyone to hear. "The final ownership documents you asked for." Steve blinked, confused. "Wait, what's going on?" Marcus calmly handed the folder to him. "You might want to read this." As Steve flipped through the pages, his expression shifted from smug to stunned. His jaw slowly dropped as he read Marcus's name, Marcus Brown, listed as the new sole owner of Crown Motors. His hands began to tremble. "This can't be real," he mumbled. "You own this place?" "That's right," Marcus said. "And you just kicked your boss out of his own building." Steve's face turned pale. Around the showroom, other employees were beginning to gather, pretending to clean or check inventory, but their eyes were locked on the scene. Steve, still struggling to speak, tried to recover. I didn't know. I thought." "You thought I was a problem, a threat, someone who didn't belong," Marcus interrupted. "And you didn't think twice about treating me like trash." Steve stammered again, trying to backtrack. "It's just, we've had issues lately and I was trying to be careful." Marcus tilted his head. "Careful would be asking for my name. Careful would be checking the appointment list. What you did wasn't careful, it was prejudiced." Just then, another employee stepped forward, a young salesman named Jordan, his voice shaking. "Mr. Brown, I've seen him do this before. Not just with you. He turns away people who don't look rich enough. A few customers even filed complaints." Marcus nodded slowly. "Thank you for being honest." He turned back to Steve. "When I bought this dealership, I promised myself I'd bring change. Not just in sales, but in culture. People like you don't build trust. They destroy it." Steve's eyes widened. "Please, don't fire me. Give me one more chance." Marcus looked him dead in the eye. "I gave you a chance the moment I walked through those doors. You blew it before I even said a word." Denise, now standing beside Marcus, handed Steve a termination letter. "Your exit package is included. Security will escort you out." Steve stood there for a moment, frozen, then quietly gathered his things. As he walked toward the door, the room was silent, not out of fear but out of realization. After Steve was gone, Marcus turned to the staff. "Let this be a new chapter. In my business, everyone is treated with respect, no matter their background, skin color, or clothing. That's not just policy. That's principle." Over the following months, Marcus did exactly what he'd always dreamed. He changed lives. He implemented diversity training, overhauled hiring practices, created internship programs for youth from underserved communities, and transformed Crown Motors into more than just a dealership. It became a symbol of what real leadership looks like, built not on power, but on purpose. And as for Marcus, he still walked through his showroom wearing hoodies and jeans, not to make a statement, but because success never changed who he was. It only gave him the platform to remind others, never judge a book by its cover, because that cover might just own the whole library. Before we jump in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell icon, because the story you're about to hear is real, powerful, and something you'll be thinking about long after the video ends. Now, let's get into it. "Get out! You don't belong here!" That's the first thing Marcus heard as he stepped into the bright, spotless showroom of Crown Motors, one of the most luxurious car dealerships in Atlanta. He wasn't looking to cause trouble. He wasn't confused or lost. He had a 10 a.m. appointment. But all Steve, the floor manager, saw was a young black man in a hoodie and jeans. Steve didn't ask for a name, didn't check the schedule, didn't even ask what Marcus was doing there. He simply pointed toward the door and said, "This place isn't for people like you. You're not buying anything. Get out." Marcus, standing calmly, simply replied, "I have a 10 a.m. meeting. Check your calendar." Steve rolled his eyes with that smugness people get when they think they're in control. "I don't care what you think you have," he snapped. "You're not a customer. You're not a buyer. You're trespassing." He didn't wait for a response. He called security. As two guards began walking over, the entire room fell into quiet discomfort. Some staff noticed something was off, but no one stepped in. And then Marcus, still calm, pulled out his phone and made a quick call. "Hi, this is Marcus," he said. "Can you come out front, please? We have a situation." Steve folded his arms, clearly pleased with himself, but that smug look would soon vanish. Within 2 minutes, the glass doors opened again, and in walked a sharply dressed woman in heels, holding a leather folder. Her name was Angela, Marcus's executive assistant. She walked straight up to the scene and said with sharp precision, "Steve, you just made a huge mistake. Meet Mr. Marcus Bennett. He's not only the 10 a.m. appointment you refused to check, he's your new boss." The air left the room. It was as if the entire building exhaled at once. You could have heard a pin drop. Steve's jaw fell open. But, he stammered, confused, scared, trying to piece together what just happened. Angela didn't wait. She opened the folder and handed him a set of documents, legal ownership papers. Marcus had purchased Crown Motors just 2 days ago. The ink was dry. His signature was on every page. This wasn't a prank. It wasn't a social experiment. It was real. And Steve? He had just kicked out the man who signed his paychecks. But Marcus wasn't finished. He looked Steve in the eye and said, "Do you treat everyone who walks in here like that, or just the ones who look like me?" Steve tried to scramble for words. I didn't know. I thought, with the hoodie, I assumed." "Exactly," Marcus said, cutting him off. "You assumed. And because of that, you disrespected someone you never even bothered to know." What Steve didn't know, what none of the staff knew, was that Marcus's journey here had been long and hard-fought. He wasn't born with wealth. He wasn't handed anything. Marcus grew up in a struggling neighborhood, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs just to pay the bills. He was the oldest of 4 siblings, and knew from a young age that if he didn't work hard, no one would hand him a future. At 19, Marcus started washing cars with a bucket and sponge, going door to door offering $10 cleanings. People laughed. Some days he made barely enough to eat. But he stayed consistent, every day, rain or shine. By 24, he'd saved enough to open a small garage, offering detailing, repairs, and eventually, resale. By 30, he owned a chain of auto businesses across Georgia, built from sweat, sacrifice, and relentless focus. And now, at 32, he had made his biggest purchase yet, Crown Motors. But he hadn't come to boast. He came dressed down intentionally, wanting to see how employees treated people when they didn't think anyone important was watching. Steve failed that test miserably. The security guards now stood awkwardly, realizing they'd nearly escorted out the man who literally owned the building. Marcus turned to them and nodded. "Thank you. I've got it from here." They stepped back. Steve, now visibly sweating, tried again. "Mr. Bennett, I'm so sorry. If I had known—" "You shouldn't have needed to know," Marcus replied firmly. "Respect shouldn't depend on how someone looks. You judged me without asking a single question." A few other employees had gathered nearby, pretending to work but clearly watching everything unfold. One of the younger salespeople finally spoke up, saying, "Honestly, sir, he does this all the time. A lot of people have complained. He treats folks differently based on how they dress or look." Marcus took a slow breath. "Thank you for your honesty." He looked back at Steve. "I came in here today to meet my team, to build a culture based on respect, excellence, and inclusion. Unfortunately, you've shown me exactly what I don't want representing my name." Steve's face dropped. "Are you firing me?" "Effective immediately," Marcus said. Angela handed Steve an envelope, his formal termination letter. "Security will see you out." And just like that, the man who thought he ran the place walked out the door. stunned and silent. Marcus then turned to the rest of the staff. "This isn't just about selling cars," he said. "This is about how we treat people. I don't care what color someone is, what they're wearing, or what you think they can afford. From now on, everyone who walks through that door is a potential customer and a human being who deserves respect." The staff nodded, some in agreement, some in shame. Over the next few months, Crown Motors changed drastically. Marcus implemented company-wide training, restructured management, and launched community outreach programs for underserved neighborhoods, offering mentorships, scholarships, and even jobs. Word spread fast. Customers came not just for luxury vehicles, but because they wanted to support a business that stood for something real. And Marcus? He still showed up in his hoodie and jeans, not to test anyone, but to remind his team that true success isn't about appearances, it's about character, respect, and heart. Marcus had been through a lot in his life. He knew the value of hard work, of persistence, and of never giving up, even when the world seemed stacked against him. But today, walking into Crown Motors, the luxury dealership he had just purchased, he was faced with something he had never expected. As he stepped through the shining glass doors, the manager on duty, Steve, immediately sized him up. He wasn't greeted with a smile, a handshake, or even a polite question. Instead, Steve, seeing a young black man in a hoodie and jeans, assumed Marcus was a troublemaker or a loiterer. Without asking a single question, without checking any appointment records, Steve pointed to the door and told Marcus to leave. "Get out. You don't belong here," he said. It wasn't a mere misunderstanding. It was a clear assumption based on how Marcus looked. And that, right there, was the problem. Steve didn't even give Marcus the chance to speak. He didn't inquire about his name or his purpose. He didn't offer any help. He didn't even offer the basic human courtesy of asking, "How can I assist you today?" Marcus, taken aback, stood silently for a moment. He wasn't some random person off the street. He wasn't an outsider looking to make trouble. He had an appointment, a very important meeting that Steve clearly wasn't willing to acknowledge. Marcus had been working for years to get here. What Steve didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just any customer, any passerby. Marcus Bennett was the new owner of Crown Motors. He had just bought the dealership 2 days ago as part of his plan to not only own businesses, but to transform them into spaces of integrity, respect, and fairness. With a calm that only comes from years of experience overcoming obstacles, Marcus didn't react angrily or aggressively. Instead, he simply pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Hi, this is Marcus," he said. "Can you come out front? We have a situation." The next few minutes passed in a tense silence. Steve was too caught up in his own assumptions to realize just how far he had overstepped. But soon, Marcus's executive assistant, Angela, entered the showroom, holding a folder in her hand. She wasn't rattled, and her expression showed no hint of surprise. She was calm, collected, prepared for this moment. As she approached the scene, she looked at Steve and said in a voice that cut through the tension, "Steve, you just made a huge mistake. Meet Mr. Marcus Bennett. He's not only the 10 a.m. appointment you refused to check, he's your new boss." The room went silent. Steve's face drained of color, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for words that wouldn't come. The other staff, now gathered near the showroom floor, looked on in stunned silence. Some exchanged whispered words. Others looked at the ground, clearly embarrassed. Steve stood frozen, caught completely off guard by the revelation. Marcus remained calm, no anger in his voice, no sense of vindication in his actions. He simply let the reality of the situation settle in. Angela opened the folder and handed Steve the ownership documents, showing him the legal papers that proved Marcus had, indeed, bought the dealership. Marcus hadn't just come to look at cars or negotiate a deal. He had come to take charge of a business that he had spent years building up to, one that had now been handed to him, in full, to run. This wasn't a joke or a game. It was real. Steve stammered for an excuse, his face flushed with disbelief. Marcus calmly cut him off. "No, Steve," he said firmly. "You didn't just mistake me for someone who didn't belong here. You made an assumption about me based entirely on how I looked, and you treated me with disrespect. You didn't ask my name. You didn't try to help me. You judged me the moment I walked in. The tension in the showroom thickened. The staff, already on edge, now looked even more uncomfortable. Marcus's words weren't filled with anger. They weren't designed to humiliate. They were simply the truth, and that truth was undeniable. He wasn't angry, but he was firm. He wasn't going to tolerate that kind of treatment in his business. This dealership was built on values: respect, service, fairness. I plan to rebuild it with those values in mind, Marcus continued. There was a calm determination in his voice, the kind of resolve that comes from understanding exactly what it takes to succeed in a world that too often judges people based on superficial things. At that moment, Marcus made a decision. He wasn't going to yell. He wasn't going to turn this into a spectacle. He wasn't going to lower himself to Steve's level. He simply said, "Steve, I'm sorry, but you're fired." He handed Steve the envelope with the formal termination letter, making it clear that there was no place for that kind of behavior in his business. There was no space for someone who couldn't see past the surface, no room for someone who judged others based on their appearances. "There's no room for that kind of thinking here anymore," Marcus added calmly. It wasn't about making Steve feel bad or causing him to suffer. It was about setting a precedent, a message to the rest of the staff, and to anyone who would walk through the doors of Crown Motors in the future. This place would be run with dignity, integrity, and respect. As Steve was escorted out, the rest of the employees remained standing, unsure of how to react. But Marcus didn't need their approval. He wasn't asking for applause or sympathy. He was setting a standard. As he turned to face the remaining staff, he spoke with purpose. This dealership is more than just cars. It's about creating an environment where everyone, no matter who they are or where they come from, can feel valued. No more judging based on appearances. No more assumptions. We're going to build a culture here that treats everyone with the respect they deserve, and we're going to do it together. The staff, still processing the events that had just unfolded, began to nod slowly. Some looked ashamed, realizing they had witnessed something that was far from the values the dealership claimed to uphold. But Marcus wasn't here to dwell on past mistakes. He was here to move forward, to transform not just the dealership, but the culture that had been allowed to fester in the past. And from that day forward, Crown Motors became more than just a luxury car dealership. It became a model for how business could be done right, how success could be achieved through fairness, through respect, and through treating every person with dignity. Marcus knew that change wasn't always easy, but it was necessary. And sometimes, in order to make the right change, you had to lead by example, even when it meant letting someone go. Because when you own a business, you own the responsibility to ensure it stands for something greater than just profit. Marcus Bennett was determined to make Crown Motors a place where that something greater was at the heart of everything. And no one, not even Steve, could stand in the way of that. Within weeks of Marcus taking over Crown Motors, the dealership began to transform. The shiny glass doors that once symbolized exclusivity and privilege now opened to a place where every person felt welcome. Marcus didn't just settle for small changes. He set out to redefine what the dealership stood for. The first thing he did was renovate the lobby. Gone were the cold, impersonal decor and the polished, flashy displays. In their place were warm, inviting spaces designed to make anyone who walked through those doors feel at home. The renovation was more than just aesthetic. It was symbolic of a new era at Crown Motors, one where respect, inclusivity, and fairness would guide every decision. He also launched a series of community outreach programs, ensuring that the dealership wasn't just a place to buy cars, but a hub for supporting local initiatives and people in need. Whether it was sponsoring youth sports teams, partnering with local charities, or organizing career development workshops, Marcus made sure Crown Motors was involved in making the community better. But perhaps the most powerful change he implemented was a hiring initiative aimed at bringing in diverse talent. He knew that true change meant creating opportunities for people from all walks of life. Every new hire was carefully considered, not just for their qualifications, but for their ability to contribute to the values Marcus had set forth. To ensure these values were ingrained in the dealership's DNA, Marcus introduced mandatory sensitivity training for all employees. It wasn't just about preventing discrimination. It was about fostering a culture of empathy, understanding, and respect. Every team member, from the sales floor to the back office, learned how to better connect with customers, how to challenge their own biases, and how to create a space where everyone felt like they belonged. Along with the sensitivity training, Marcus instituted a customer-first policy. He made it clear that no matter who walked into Crown Motors, whether they wore a suit, a hoodie, or jeans, they would be treated with the same respect and care. The goal was simple: to ensure that every customer, no matter their background or appearance, would feel like they were the most important person in the room. As the changes took root, word of Marcus's revolution at Crown Motors spread like wildfire. The story of how he had taken over the dealership, fired the manager who had made assumptions based on appearance, and turned the business into an inclusive, community-focused enterprise, went viral. Social media exploded with messages of support. People from all over Atlanta and beyond shared the story. They were inspired by the way Marcus had turned what could have been a negative experience into a catalyst for real change. The support came pouring in, with customers eager to see firsthand what was happening at Crown Motors. People came not just to buy cars, but to be part of something bigger. They wanted to support a business that was built on the idea that respect and fairness should always come first. As the dealership's new face took shape, the impact was undeniable. More and more customers lined up to buy cars, not just because of the quality vehicles on display, but because they were drawn to the story that Marcus had built. Crown Motors had become a symbol that success and respect had no dress code, no color, and no limitations. It didn't matter if you wore a suit or a hoodie. If you walked through the door, you were treated like family. And Marcus, who had started with nothing, had built something that went far beyond just profit. It was about creating a space where everyone could see themselves reflected, where no one was judged by their appearance or background. Marcus didn't just buy a business. He made a statement that resonated across the city. Respect has no dress code. He proved that success has no color. And most importantly, he showed that everyone deserves a chance to be seen for who they really are, not just who society assumes them to be. This wasn't just a change for the sake of profit, it was a change for the sake of humanity. And in the end, that was the real success Marcus had built. As Marcus's story shows us, true success is about more than just business. It's about creating change and showing respect for everyone, no matter where they come from or what they look like. If you believe in making the world a better place and treating others with fairness and dignity, then hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the bell notification so you never miss a story that's sure to inspire. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.